Hello. It's amazing to see a packed hall, really great, and I'm glad to have been invited tonight, and because I think it's so important that the UK groups also get involved to help support Scottish women in this campaign, because what happens here in Scotland will impact the whole of the UK, there's no doubt about it. So I'm really happy to be supporting all of the women in Scotland, all of the different groups that work on this GRA campaign. So thank you for inviting me. Okay, so what have trans rights got to do with women? And why do women like me spend so much of our time insisting that we have a voice in this debate? And why is it important that everyone here participates in the Scottish consultation on GRA reform? Well, the reason is because the GRA is not about who can be transgender, it's about who can be male and who can be female. So it determines who gets access to female rights, and those are the sex-based rights that generations of women before us have fought for. So of course women need to have a voice in this debate. It's obvious that there are two groups involved here, at least two groups, with a stake in this law. And so society needs to find a way to balance the rights and the wants and needs of two different groups of people. So on the one hand, we have to balance the rights of a male person to be legally recognised as female based on gender identity. But we also have to balance the right of a female person to be able to describe herself and her reality based on sex. So there's an obvious conflict here, and it can only be resolved when everyone is heard, and that must include women. So an uneasy compromise position was found many years ago, in 2004, when it was decided that some transsexual males should be allowed to legally transition and change the sex on their birth certificate to female. But the compromise that was reached at that point was that it must be a highly regulated system with robust medical gatekeeping, because the purpose was to help a few thousand severely dysphoric post-operative transsexuals. Numbers so small that the European Court of Human Rights said, and I quote, that society could reasonably be expected to tolerate it. But of course, by that they meant women need to tolerate it. But that proposition has now radically changed. We're no longer talking about a well-regulated system here that would benefit a few severely dysphoric transsexuals. We're talking about a completely unregulated system with no objective eligibility requirements whatsoever. Because that system that's being proposed in Scotland and in the UK more widely is to be based on self-declaration. So this opens it up to any male over the age of 16, for whatever reason, to say he was born female. No doctors, no surgery, no changes to his appearance. Simply fill in and sign a statutory declaration. So that's a dramatic change to the status quo. It's no longer something that women can or should be expected to just tolerate. Because when you open up the sex category of female to any male, the word female becomes meaningless, and so do female rights. Now, some people will tell you that GRA reform won't impact women at all. It's just admin to make a trans person's life that bit easier. They'll tell us that access to female-only spaces and services is regulated by the Equality Act, not the Gender Recognition Act, and that the Equality Act already allows us to lawfully exclude trans people from female-only spaces. And no changes are being made to the Equality Act, so the law on female-only spaces will continue as normal. Now, they are actually half right there, but the devil is in the detail. Because it's true that it's the Equality Act that allows us to have female-only spaces, not the GRA. and it can already be lawful to exclude all males from a female-only space for reasons of privacy, safety and fairness. Now, when I say all males, that includes males who identify as women from a female-only space. It also includes males who have legally transitioned to female and have a gender recognition certificate and a female birth certificate. And this is because the Equality Act allows us to treat these two different types of females differently. So we can treat someone who is female by virtue of gender reassignment differently to someone who is female by virtue of birth. Or in other words, we can treat females who are born male differently to females who are born female. And that's the key to this, because the GRA erases that important legal distinction between the females who are born male and the females like us who are born female. Because the GRA allows a male to become female in the eyes of the law, but not just be female, to have actually been born female. And this is an obvious legal fiction, and it becomes totally confidential. In fact, it will become a criminal offence for an official to reveal the trans person's true birth sex. So actually their trans status becomes completely hidden. And I'm going to repeat this again because it's really important. So the GRA allows a male to become female in the eyes of the law, but not just to be female, but to have actually been born female. It's a legal fiction and it becomes totally confidential. And it's a criminal offence for an official to reveal the trans person's birth sex. So this male will actually become female by virtue of birth, just like us, apart from a few men. So, although the Equality Act exemptions exist on paper, and that they do allow a female-only space to be reserved for female-born people, in reality it will be unworkable, because males can decide to be born female too. So, this is particularly problematic because female-only spaces are already hanging by a thread. So our access to female-only spaces needs strengthening. Now is not the time to weaken it further. They're rarely ever used because either organisations don't know they exist or they've been told they don't exist by transgender lobby groups like Stonewall. Or if organisations do know they exist, they might be scared of the reputational damage that they would have if they dared to implement them. So GRA reform will be the final nail in the coffin for female-only spaces, and the Equality Act exemptions will be impossible to use, and so they won't be used. It's as simple as that. So what's the point in laws for women on paper if they can never be used? They might as well not exist, and so that's the same as taking those rights away from us. Now, the danger of the GRA reform is also about language capture and a woman's ability to discuss and uphold her sex-based rights. Now, like it or not, the word woman is already ambiguous. Trans women are women is already the accepted mantra of most of our mainstream women's organisations. So this means that our sex is no longer the shared characteristic held by all the women that they advocate for. So the original focus on sex-based rights is lost. Even worse than that, that focus is often seen as exclusionary and is actively discouraged. So we've all but lost the word woman. But we can still speak the truth that a trans woman is male. It's still legally accurate. We can't be sanctioned for saying it, and we can appeal and win Twitter bans. We can challenge the media when they get someone's sex wrong. And we can pursue complaints about breaches of accuracy in news reporting. Now, I'm often put under pressure as a stakeholder representative for women in transgender policy meetings not to even refer to the sex of trans people, even when it's central to the argument that I'm having. But because it's legal to say that trans women are male, because they are, I can still respectfully refuse to say that, because it's the law that they are male. But that would change overnight if GRA reform came in, because trans women wouldn't be male anymore, they would literally be female, and I couldn't then say on Twitter, trans women are male, I'd be booted off. So, trans women no longer want to be just women. They're now, no longer want to be just trans women. They're now asking to actually be female, and for their trans history to be a secret. They want to be identical to the cis women, indistinguishable from us. But that robs us of our own unique sex-based language that we need to describe ourselves and our rights, because we're not the same. We need our own rights, unique to us and tailored to our sex-based needs. Because how will campaigners, policymakers and journalists be able to do their job if we're all obliged to name someone who was born male, with a male body and male genitals, as being the female sex? How can we protect single-sex spaces and services when we can no longer know or say who was born male or female? How can a female-only space ever be guaranteed to be male-free if we can no longer acknowledge that the trans women in them are male? How will you be able to express your legitimate concerns if you can no longer say things like, I don't want that trans woman sharing a changing room with my daughter because that person is male? Or, I don't want a trans woman to perform a cervical smear on me because that person is male? Or, I don't want my elderly mother to be washed and dressed by a trans woman at the care home because that person is male? Or, no, I don't think it's fair or safe for my daughter to play rugby with a team against a team that fields a trans woman because that person is male. So GRA reform fatally undermines sex-based rights of women and girls. We are no longer being asked to simply treat a man as if he was a woman. We're not even being asked anymore to consider a trans woman is a type of woman. It's now being demanded that all trans women literally are female. And if we can't talk freely about material reality of sex, we cannot discuss, monitor or uphold our sex-based rights. And that is why GRA reform is bad law. And so I'm going to finish by just saying this. So trans people already have a mechanism to change legal sex status. And it's right and fair that a robust medical gatekeeping process is in place for that. Unregulated access to birth certificates is a step too far, because this demand encroaches too far on our sex-based rights. And there are rights. They're not for the government to give away. So we can all say no to this, and we must all say no. Thank you.